Welcome back into the College Football 360 YouTube channel where we analyze every single angle of the greatest sport known to man, which is, of course, college football. In today's episode, we continue our season in review series starring the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who finished the season 7-6 with a bowl win in the Pinstripe Bowl. If you are new to this series, it's very simple. We go back through said team's season, in this case Nebraska. We grade all the positions. We talk about the highs and lows of the season, and at the end, I give my general thoughts. And at the end of the video, I give some general improvements that I think a said team can make. And that's pretty much the whole video. So, with that being said, before we get started, please consider subscribing as we continue to grow this channel. If you consider yourself a college football fanatic, then I want you here as part of this growing culture of college football fans that we have on this channel. We have some amazing people already subbed, and I want you to be the next one. So go ahead and consider that. Also, comment your thoughts down below on the Huskers season. Was it a failure or was it just about what you were expecting? Let me hear it down below. Also, like the video, share it around. And without further ado, let's just get started. Okay, so now on the season before we get into the grades. The offense did improve 20 spots. I mean, it was around the 115 range, 120 range, and now they're in the top 100 in terms of offense, but it still didn't look good. I mean, this offense has a ways to go, and I think that they've done enough in the portal to, again, go up another 30, 40 spots next season in the 2025 season. But this offense still has a ways to go. Um, the play calling was terrible pretty much until Dana Holgerson got in my opinion. So, and we'll talk about coaching in the next segment as well. And the defense kept them in games. I mean, the defense was awesome. Again, another top 20 unit. It was top 10 against rushing offenses. And it was just another amazing defense. I didn't think that they could get better after the previous season, but they did. And kudos to them for the defense always kept them in games. I think that they averaged giving up around 17.4 points per game, something like that. But the special teams lost them games. The turnovers in the special teams units especially lost them games at times. Uh, all the way from terrible punts, just mistimed punts. I get it that Brian Buschini was actually a pretty good punter, but there were times where he was inconsistent. The kicking situation was inconsistent. There were turnovers made on special teams in the punt and kick return game, and it was just the special teams was very poor, and it lost them games. And the last point here, excuse me, is that Matt Rule definitely needs to improve his game management, especially his timeout usage. It's not good right now. It's not the worst in the world, but it's not good. I think that veterans on the staff like Dana Holgerson can help him out. Guys like Phil Snow, who just came in, those older guys can help him out in terms of his game management. But right now, it's pretty bad. And honestly, that's an improvement that has to be made in order for them to continue to establish more wins. So yes. Okay, so now we get into the grading. We'll start with the offense here, then we'll go to defense, and then overall coaching was a D plus. The only reason it's not a D minus is because Dana Holgerson did come in the last couple games of the season and kind of save what they had. The coaching situation was terrible. There was way too many screens. There was not enough perimeter blocking, and I think in the Ohio State game they called about 20 screens for maybe 10 yards. And that's being generous. And just the whole scheme, too many long developing routes, especially with the wide receivers that you had. It just wasn't a good scheme at all from Marcus Satterfield, the previous offensive coordinator. So I put a lot of blame on Marcus Satterfield. I think Dana Holgerson is a really, really top notch offensive coordinator, and that's the reason why this grade isn't any lower. At quarterback, we have a B grade. Dylan Raiola he had his ups and downs. Yes, he was injured. He was nicked up throughout the season. He had a bad back, a bad ankle, a bad shoulder at times. Of course, they weren't bad enough to keep him out of games. And then obviously he took a big hit in the UCLA game. But and I think that did hamper his play a bit. But that comes with the trade, especially when you're coming straight from high school to college. It doesn't matter how talented you are, there will be some struggles, and there was some struggles. I think that he will definitely keep improving throughout his sophomore and junior season. But this past year, I mean, it wasn't all bad. I mean, he threw for 2,819 yards. He guided the Huskers to their first winning season in a decade. He threw for 13 touchdowns. He did take 27 sacks, which was a big problem, and he threw 11 interceptions. I think he'll be able to cut down on the interceptions, but my question to him is if he can cut down on the sack numbers, because that 27 sacks is a lot, and he lost 184 sack yards. So there's a little bit of concern there for Rayola. Again, I think he's a very good quarterback. I think he will be a very good quarterback. But right now, I can only give him a B grade. At running back, we have a B minus. Dante Dowdell led the team in yards, even though he was probably the least explosive back in this room. He just got him the dirty way. He would get 3 yards in a cloud of dust. I don't think he had to run over 20 yards. Over 30 yards. I think he had a couple 20-yarders. But he had 615 yards on the ground this season with 12 touchdowns. Emmett Johnson, who wasn't getting played nearly enough, he'll be running back one this next upcoming year. But he tallied 600 yards with about 30 less carries than Dowdell. So if he would have got 30 more carries, he's up near the 800s range by some quick math. He had only one touchdown, however. So I think that this running back room had a lot of potential, and they did not utilize it correctly. Again, that reflects back on coaching, but you have to look at the results too. So I gave running back a B minus. Wide receiver, I gave a B plus. Jamal Banks went for just under 600 yards and 3 touchdowns. Isaiah Nair was super inconsistent, but he did put up some decent stats with 455 yards and 5 touchdowns. The real breakout here was Ja'Cory Barney, probably the best player on this offense. He is a true freshman. He went for 447 yards on 55 receptions, and he was an absolute dog. A straight line speed track star. I mean, he's insanely fast. And I think that he will be really, really good wide receiver, maybe even a round one type of wide receiver with this skill set that he has. He can also take a hit. He's a very small guy, and you knew it when he got hit, but he would get right back up. He never showed any signs of weakness or anything like that. He's a very tough individual, and he established a chemistry with Dylan Raiola early and often. So I think that Ja'Cory Barney is the bright spot on this offense, in my opinion. At tight end, you had a couple decent tight ends. Thomas Fidone went for 373 yards, no touchdowns. It's just not great stats. Fidone was very slow. He had good hands and good route running, but he was a slower tight end. Nate Borkacher had way more potential, but he only had 6 receptions for 102 yards. Um, Again, so he was a much more explosive and I think a better tight end than Fidone, but they didn't use him. They didn't really use their tight end all season. I think that was one of my big knocks on this offense is that they were just throwing the 3 main guys, which would have been Banks, Nair, and Barney. If they could have worked Fidone or Borkercher in there a little bit more, I think that this offense would have had another dimension in it. And I think that they're going to be working on that this offseason. So I think that that's something to work on. All right, so our last one here is offensive line. I gave it a B minus, so pretty much an average. It was an average offensive line. You got some guys in there that will be on NFL teams. Players like Ben Scott at center, Bryce Benhart, the tackle, who has been with the team for forever. Those guys will probably be on an NFL roster. And you got guys coming in like Henry Latovsky, Justin Evans, Jenkins, Gunnar Gatula, guys who were already in the building that will stay in the building. This offensive line, it didn't generate much push, but what I will say is a lot of the sacks from Raiola were either coverage sacks or him running into sacks. It wasn't all the offensive line's fault, and I think that this offensive line is kind of underrated in my opinion. It definitely could get better, and it has gotten better through the portal and just the evolution of some of these younger players, such as Gunnar Gatula and Justin Evans Jenkins. Latovsky, of course, and you got some guys like Sam Sledge and Grant Bricks coming up, and obviously Teddy Prohaska, who's coming back from another injury. We'll see how that works out as well. So this offensive line gets a B minus grade in my opinion. Now we move on to defense here. Defense coaching was an A. Tony White and his staff were amazing this past year. Yes, I know since he left, some Huskers fans will be like, "Oh, well, he wasn't great on third down or he struggled in this area." No, guys, he was one of the best defensive coordinators in college football last season. I thought he was going to get a head coaching job after the season. Of course, he made the lateral move and took some of his coaches with him to Florida State. Be that as it may, we are talking about this past season in review. So the coaching grade is an A. The D line, in my opinion, was an A plus. It generated tons of pressure. Again, this defense as a whole was top 10. I think they were number 7 in the nation when it came to defending the run, and that starts up front. And with your defensive line, you got guys like Ty Robinson and Nash Hutmacher, who will both be NFL guys. Ty Robinson probably within the first 4 rounds, in my opinion. Nash Hutmacher probably in the back half of the draft, but these two guys combined for a lot of muscle mass, both of them over 300 pounds, and they were vicious and tenacious as well. Cameron Lenhart provided some speed on the edge. And then you got Elijah Judy worked in there. Riley Van Poppel got worked in there. And what Nebraska has is they had a lot of, and of course, you can't forget guys like MJ. Well, he's a linebacker. Never mind. We'll talk about him in the linebacker section. But you can't. This defensive line rotated a bunch. It was their staple this when they first got there, and they've continued it. So that's what helps them stay fresh and generate lots of pressure. Sorry, the guy that I was missing was Jamari Butler. He was also really good this past season. A little bit of a disappointing sack number with only 2. Maybe around 6 or 7 would have been more appropriate for him, but he was still nonetheless very good. Guys like Wills McGahee got in there a little bit. So, again, this defensive line will still be good next season. It won't be as good. Probably won't be A+ grade, but I think that they're well deserving of this A+ grade. Linebacker was a B+. You had guys like John Bullock in there getting a couple sacks. MJ Sherman was pretty good as well. So this linebacker core was pretty darn good. It wasn't the best by any means. Javin Wright got in there as well, but it was still a very solid linebacker room. Quarterback is a little bit of a different story because I thought this grade would be ultimately higher, but the corners were probably one of the weaker rooms in this defense. Tommy Hill looked to be a first round pick, then he got injured and didn't play a lot of the year. So that kind of threw a curveball in there. So again, he's a really good player, but just looking at the results, he wasn't on the field a whole lot. So you can't really do much with that. But Sear Wright, when he came in late in the season, he was and just an absolute star. He was amazing. He was really, really good. Marquez Buford Jr. was also very good as well. So guys like that, the corner room was, and Malcolm Hartsaw, he was a bit of a hybrid. I don't know whether to talk about him here with the safeties, but this corner room was definitely suspect at times. But you had guys doing great individual work like Tommy Hill when he was in, like Sierra Wright when he was in. So when it comes to the safeties, now I gave him a B- grade. I think Isaac Gifford is one of the more overrated players on this defense. Yes, he got a lot of tackles, but he missed a lot of tackles as well. He didn't have any sacks. He was a liability in pass coverage. And I thought that he was just one of the more overrated players on this defense. Deshaun Singleton, who just announced that he'll be coming back for the next season, which is huge, by the way, was also a very good player. He's always been underrated at Nebraska. So I think this safety room was average, so I put it at a B-. Okay, so now we look at the overall grades here. With the offense, with the coaching, excuse me, I have a B coaching grade. Again, you had really high grades and really low grades in the same staff. So I think it averages out to about a B. The offense was a B minus, the defense was a B plus, and the special teams was a C minus. The only thing keeping this from being a complete disaster was John Hull. He came back strong after the Purdue game where he missed like 4 or 5 field goals in a row. And he was really, really good the rest of the season. So that's all I have to say about the special teams. So this team grade overall, when you average that all together, I think is about a B minus team grade. Again, something that can be definitely improved upon. Okay, now we will get into the highs of the season. The first one being beating longtime rivals Colorado and Wisconsin. I think that Colorado game was extremely important to win for Nebraska. I mean, if you don't win that game, then honestly, I think the fan base and what I can gather from the fan base is that the season would have been a failure. And then the Wisconsin game obviously was huge, getting to that 6 mark for the bowl win. It was always going to be extremely tough to beat Iowa on the road, which is they're going to be the next week. So it was it was paramount that they beat Wisconsin, and they did. And it's not like these games were close either. I mean, you're beating your rivals by 18 points, and then with the Wisconsin win, it was like 20 plus points. So again, beating longtime rivals, beating them by a lot, and beating them when they matter most in the season. And then making the first bowl game since the 2016 season. I can't stress how huge that is for your program. If you don't make a bowl game in your second season here, then it was just not going to go well at all. And then on top of that, winning your first bowl game in 10 plus years. Yes, it did help that you played Boston College, a team that's frankly was very mid this past year, and they were sitting their best players. But hey, you still won it. And I mean, it was their first bowl game in 10 plus year bowl game win in 10 plus years. So good on the Huskers for breaking that record. People can stop talking about them now when it comes to not making bowl games, and they can continue working upward from here. Okay, so now we'll get to the lows of the season. We'll get this out of the way real quick, but it has to be talked about. The close losses, again, haunting the season. The one-score losses, I mean, you go back to, obviously, the Iowa game, the USC game, the UCLA game, although that game wasn't really close. UCLA kind of had that game. And then, obviously, the big killer was against Ohio State, where you lost by 4 and you very easily should have won that game. Uh, you go back to the Illinois game as well. So, I mean, that's like 4 games right there where if you flip even half of them, you're a 9-win team, 10-win team, and you're where Illinois is right now, and Illinois is pretty darn good right now as well. So again, the close losses haunted this team all season long. I was glad that they were able to beat Boston College close. So they showed that it can be done. And then losing to rival Iowa again. I know that however short this rivalry has been, it's been a fierce one. So losing to rival Iowa always sucks as well. And then Rayola leading the Big Ten in interceptions. It was again a caveat. He was tied with 11 with I think 2 other players off the top of my head from what I researched. But be that as it may, he led the Big Ten in interceptions. And if you want to win these close games, you have to cut down on the interception numbers. You really do. So those are the lows of the season. Okay, so to close out today's episode, again, I encourage you, Husker fans and other fans watching this video, please subscribe. It would really help out the channel. Share this video around, comment your thoughts down below, like the video as well. Here are some improvements that I'm looking for next season. Rayola improves his accuracy and scrambling ability. A lot of his interceptions were due to his downfield accuracy. He was not that accurate when throwing the ball down the field. He missed a couple touchdowns, especially the one late in the Illinois game, where you very easily could have won the game if that throw was on target to Luke Lindenmeyer. And then, it just plagued them all season, his accuracy issues. And then scrambling, he looked like Drew Aller in his 2023 season, where it's like, he's not very sure. Should I take off now? Should I not? A lot of indecision was made throughout the whole season. But when he did scramble, it was very effective. Again, like Drew Aller, when he did scramble in 2023, it was very effective. But, you want him to be able to make that decision lightning fast and not be second guessing his decision. If he needs to take off, take off. If he needs to stay in the pocket, stay in the pocket. So that's some things that I'm looking forward to when it comes to Rayola improving. And then win some of the one-score games, please. Like we said 4 right off the bat in the past segment. Win 2 of them, and you're a 9-10 win team. Again, just winning these one-score games, and then Rule improving his in-game management. We already talked about that. So that is it for today's video. Do all the stuff I told you to do. We are building a great community here, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.